Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Policing. On this episode, we're joined by representatives from Autism NI, and given it's Autism Acceptance Month, it's the perfect opportunity for us to raise some awareness about this important issue. I'm your host, Paddy Mullan, and hosting with me today is Superintendent Finola Dornan. Fin, could you briefly introduce yourself so our listeners know what you sound like?
Yes, happy to, and it's great to be here with my colleagues from Autism NI. My name's Finola Dornan. In the day job, I'm local policing superintendent for South Belfast, but many people will know that I do a lot of work around autism support, disability support and wider neurodivergent conditions in the organisation. I'm very proud to do so.
So thank you very much for taking some time out of your hectic schedule to talk to us about this today. So we're also joined by a couple of other members, Naomi, Christine and Kris. Would you mind introducing yourself, starting maybe from my left here? Kris, go ahead.
So my name's Kris, Kris Morrison, and I'm the Family Support Manager here at Autism NI. I support a range of different staff around with different services available in Autism NI. We have a multitude of services and we can talk a little bit more about those as we go on.
Thank you. Naomi?
Hi, I'm Naomi Maxwell and I am a volunteer with Autism NI and an autistic individual. I also published a piece of research recently on PSNI officers' experiences and interactions with autistic individuals in the community.
Looking forward to getting into that a bit more detail shortly. And then last but no means least.
Hi, I'm Kearney and I am the Director of Development for Autism NI and I work mainly in the areas of training and inclusion.
Thank you very much. So I think in terms of sort of kicking this off and sort of as I already explained, we'll just try to keep it as open as possible and just jump in if you have something to say. But Christine, I don't suppose you could give us a bit of an overview of what Autism NI does?
Yeah, absolutely. So Autism NI is Northern Ireland's autism charity and we exist to support the 35,000 autistic people in Northern Ireland and their families, and then we campaign to raise autism acceptance in society. So we have a wide range of different services available for autistic people and their families, including our helpline service, our early intervention work, working with families, direct work with a wide range of different autistic individuals. So we have children, young people and adult projects. And then we do a lot of training and support for organisations as well. So we provide training to organisations to build more inclusion and accessibility across services for autistic employees, clients and customers. And we also do a lot of lobbying and advocacy work for the whole of Northern Ireland to really represent the autistic voice across Northern Ireland and to ensure that services are really there to meet the needs.
It's such important work and I'm sure it's really challenging. Like that's a lot of people, 35,000 people that you're representing as the main charity. So I'm sure you guys are up against it in terms of the volume of work coming your way.
Absolutely. Paddy, on our helpline last year, we took over 7,500 calls. And on our helpline, we have 2 full-time members of staff and 1 part-time. And the issues coming through and the support needs vary day to day. No 2 calls are the same. It ranges from support for autistic adults to support for parents who are calling, maybe looking some support for a child with a new or a recent diagnosis. And that's when we have the opportunity to then refer them to our direct individual services, whereby a family can receive 3 sessions of support for a child with a new or recent diagnosis, and that helps them to navigate any concerns or any questions, or indeed let some celebrations as well of the skills and talents of our young people as well that are coming through.
I'm sure. Out of interest, what's the opening hours for your helpline?
The opening hours are Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. So it is that kind of standard 9 to 5 times, but there isn't just the opportunity around calling. We also have an info whereby people can send an email to that, and then that could be the person's preferred method of communication. So given that, then the helpline workers will then pick that up and respond to them appropriately for that. And then obviously at times it does get very busy. There is obviously as well then the option to leave a voicemail, and the staff will pick that up as soon as they get round to that.
That's fantastic. Really impressive.
Well, and I have to say I couldn't endorse it highly enough, the support that the helpline gives, and it's something that I have highly publicised organisationally. Anybody who comes to me, I would tend to point them that direction, and any feedback I have had has been really positive around the really wide range of advice that it gives to people in issues they may be experiencing, either if they're an autistic individual or their parents or carers of children with autism. It has been certainly many of that call demand from you has come from within our workforce here in the police service.
Oh, that's great, Finn. That's really nice to hear that. It's always good to hear positive feedback, and it's really, really endearing as well whenever, you know, a parent or carer or an autistic adult gets in touch after they've had a call, maybe supported through quite a challenging call. You know, whenever they come back and give that feedback, and, you know, it really does help as well, even with staff as well, because you're on a phone, you don't always get to see the outcome. So it's really positive whenever they do receive that feedback from people. So thank you for that, Finn.
Yeah, and I have to extend that feedback to Christine and team as well, in terms of, you know, I think Autism Support Group in the PSNI has been on a major journey over the last 6 or 7 years. A really positive journey, and one that's been massively underpinned and supported by the advice and guidance of our colleagues in Autism NI. And as a minority support association, we are quite unusual because of that external partnership that we have, and it's really trying to bring lived experience into the organisation, best practice into the organisation, and certainly a lot of the work that Naomi has done in terms of her research that came to my attention via Autism NI, and I think it's been really game changing for me in terms of having an evidence base around how we can support the organisation to keep stepping forward into good practice.
Well, that's perfect timing, Naomi, because we're going to go to you next. So tell me a bit about autism. How does it affect people? Let's get into a bit of that research.
Yeah, so autism is a neurodevelopmental condition, and it affects how we communicate, how we understand and how we react in social situations, but also just with the world in general around us. So we refer to autism as a spectrum because whilst there are traits that are commonly experienced, these tend to vary in how the individual experiences them. So, but there are some common ones such as difficulty and anxiety in social situations, a preference for routine, and sensory differences. So the biggest areas that you would probably see it for you guys would be whenever like social interactions, following instructions, understanding phrases and how to respond to questions. So given that it is a spectrum and everyone has a different profile, the best way to kind of gauge that profile is to just ask the individual or ask their carer. Yeah.
So that obviously, I mean, leads nicely into what we're trying to achieve today, is to give some advice and support to our officers and staff that may come across individuals that have autism during the course of their duties or their role. And you know, you've highlighted that it's a spectrum, which I suppose would be challenging potentially to understand then specifically how there's no one-stop shop guidance here is kind of what I'm getting at, which I'm assuming you agree with. So what is the best way for us to approach that? I
think the primary way would be to have an awareness of what behaviours you might see in someone with autism, and a recognition that these behaviours can sometimes, from a policing perspective, be misinterpreted, such as lack of eye contact or no response in potential suspects. That can be viewed as quite suspicious. And then it could also be viewed as deception in victim and witnesses, but for an autistic person, that's them. That's just their way of being, especially in stressful situations. How questions are phrased, particularly broad or quite literal questions, can be overwhelming, and that can make interviews less effective at best, but it can also be a breach of the right to justice at worst.
Let's get into that a bit more. Can you give me an example?
Not
I suppose, put you on the spot or anything, you know.
Yeah, so in my research, one of the things that police officers found where they didn't have enough support was how they ask interview questions, and the kind of struggle that can be with victims in particular with autism, how they answer quite broad questions. So you might ask, how did a crime occur? And that autistic individual might not actually understand what you mean by that. Is that asking how they let that crime occur? How physically did that crime occur? Or so there's so much interpretation there, and autistic people, like I know for me, I really struggle at feeling like I have to find the correct answer. And whilst PSNI officers will say there is no correct answer, for an autistic individual, we're like, but there's a socially acceptable answer, and that can be a lot of stress and can often be more traumatized.
So would the general advice then be to try and make your questions as specific as possible and, clarify exactly what you want from an answer? Is that fair?
Yeah, I think, there are lots of key things that officers can be aware of to change and adapt their approach. And one of those is really being as clear as possible. Be clear in your expectations. Be clear as to what you need from the individual. Be clear as to what the process is. So, for example, if you're processing an individual, telling them clearly and using simple language and giving extra time to process, all of these things can really make a difference to helping an individual to manage their anxiety, helping them to understand the process, and helping them to really engage in the way that works for them.
Yeah, and I think it's also really important to just ask. I think taking the time just to say, do you understand the question, or do I need to put this differently? Or asking an individual, it's okay to ask. I think sometimes people are afraid to ask, does a person have any additional needs? And obviously if the answer is yes, they do, then it's about that officer taking that on board. No one's expecting anyone to have all the answers all the time.
Yeah.
But it's about taking that on board and just being able to be mindful, adapt their communication potentially. But also, for example, if you are sitting with an individual, with an autistic individual, I've supported an autistic individual recently who finds it really, really difficult to sit still. So they need to take regular movement breaks. And that became apparent to me from the outset with the young person, just through their body language. So I was able to pick up on that, and rather than make this a thing, because obviously within the school environment they're used to having to sit and actually moving around, they're being told no, you can't do that, sit down. So that became a huge problem for them. So I picked this up whenever I was in the session, and given that, I just stood up myself and started moving around myself and just mirroring that kind of, it's okay to do this. I'm moving around and saying, it's okay, I like to get up and move, I get stiff, do you want to move? If we want to move around, it's fine. I'm normalising that that's okay to do.
Yeah, and I think, there is a degree as a police officer, and I have felt this myself, and, look, my journey with autism is one as a mother, and where I sit on this now is very different in terms of my own understanding and skills than where it was 10 years ago. So I do remember feeling intimidated by autism and almost slightly frightened of it. That's not where I sit on it now. But that had come with a lot of self-education and a lot of work to try and enable my children to have an accessible education and an accessible life. And I suppose the key thing that I have learnt is that the smallest of things, seemingly insignificant, can change the game completely. And I think you're absolutely right around asking, and as police officers we're supposed to know, and it's very difficult sometimes to give up that control, but it is important to do that. So don't be afraid. You're not going to offend anybody by asking, do you have any additional needs, any communication needs? How can I best support you? And take the steer from the individual who you are engaging with. And if they are a younger person or a person with really quite significant communication difficulties, they will usually have a carer or person to support them. Organisationally, good practice would say that anybody with autism should have a registered intermediary that can be used in custody for subjects. It can be used in witness interviews. And we do have a lot of advice available on our point pages through the Autism Support Group. But the bottom line is nobody is expecting you to be an expert, and all you have to do is your best. And I would highlight, just recently we've had some amazing feedback about how fabulously our officers have dealt with a person, a family where a child with autism was really in a very crisis mode. And actually the work of these officers that was done intuitively, the family say has changed their whole lives. It has been life-changing for them, and we're looking to promote some of that later on in the month. So don't underestimate as well, just naturally when you're willing to be led by others, how well we can do our jobs.
Yeah, I think that's really positive, Finn, to hear that, that feedback. And I think that's really important for the officers as well.
Mm-hmm.
And even using that case as a best practice example for other officers, because, we did make reference there that sometimes people do feel frightened and they're afraid of doing or saying the wrong thing. So I think it's really important that that's shared. I think that's really positive.
Yeah, and I think with policing as well, a lot of the publicity that we can get sometimes is taken out of context.
Yeah.
So regardless of the set of circumstances, the court of public opinion can make a judgment that isn't necessarily fair or reflective. And I would also say that we do have a lot of lived experience in the organisation. There are autistic police officers and staff members hidden in plain sight right across this organisation, and they are adding a lot of value. I'm really pleased that we see big moves in the last number of years where people feel much more confident and safe to acknowledge that and be open about it. Certainly they're being open with me and my colleagues in autism support, and that is a big change.
Great.
So we do see that quite a lot, and we have an even bigger network of parents and carers who have a significant amount of experience from their own lives, which they bring to bear, and that is lived experience, which helps not only them but their colleagues, and they provide that peer support in frontline and supporting roles day and daily.
And if they're listening, share that experience with your colleagues. It's really important that your colleagues get to learn.
Yeah.
And don't underestimate how important that is. I mean, I'm in no way an expert in this field, but it seems that organisationally I somehow am.
But I think there's something really important and empowering about being able to share stories and being able to just have that open conversation, because that's something that we talk about a lot within our training and our inclusion work. It's not about, as lots of people have said already, it's not about knowing all the answers. It's not about having the one size fits all approach, because that doesn't exist. It's about feeling confident to say, can you tell me more about that? How does that impact you? What do you need from me? And I think the more people share their experiences, share their journeys, and talk about autism and neurodiversity, the more people feel more comfortable, and we break down that initial stigma and that initial barrier or fear of having that conversation, which is really, really important.
Yeah, and I think, Paddy, sorry, just coming in the back of what Christine said there as well, I think it's really important as well that at times we as individuals feel confident enough at maybe to challenge other individuals as well. So if there is something that we hear, with a negative connotation, or there is, language being used that we don't feel is acceptable, I think it is important that we are all advocates and that we do, feel confident and competent. As Christine said, none of us know it all of the time, but I think it's really important that we also just don't let things slip, and that we are confident to actually challenge some of those conversations that we do hear at times, and holding people accountable, for that, because I think that's the only way to invoke change.
And I think that's a very important point, because I think some part of the reason why people don't want to ask the question is because they're afraid that they'll say the wrong thing. But it's okay to make a mistake, and we're talking about two different things here. It's okay to make a mistake, but if you're being malicious in your words, then that's when it needs to be challenged. But it's okay to educate people and to be educated yourself and show a bit of vulnerability there.
Absolutely. Language is forever changing, and we all try our best to keep abreast of, autistic first language and what the preference is as well. But we will get it wrong. Everyone gets it wrong sometimes. And I think it's acceptance for ourselves that, that will happen. Yep. And it is about saying, an individual maybe saying, actually, I prefer this. And the individual being able to say, okay, thank you for letting me know that. I'll be mindful of that moving forward.
And I think that's something that comes up a lot within our training as well. One of the key things that we talk about a lot within our training is around what does the language look like in the autism and neurodiversity world. And it's not about saying, well, this is exactly what everybody should use, but it is about giving people an understanding, helping people to understand even what neurodiversity means in regards to autism, that it's not just autism, that there are lots and lots of different conditions and differences under that neurodiversity umbrella. And, empowering yourself with that understanding, seeking out those answers, seeking out those conversations, I think is a really important step for any officer who might be listening and is thinking, do you know what? I think I got some good practice, but I don't know where I am and I don't know what else I could do better. It's having those conversations, it's going and connecting in with the resources and the supports that are there. I know Autism NI, we have worked with the PSNI to develop webinars that are there for any PSNI officer to use to find out more about the language, to find out more about some of those key differences, so that they're less likely to make a judgment or misunderstand a particular situation, and they're able to say, well, do you know what, something else might be happening here for this person, and I'm going to ask so that I can get it right for this person.
That's great.
And I think what Finn was saying about the personal experience, I know in my research it was a key kind of predictor of higher levels of confidence and how the officers felt they could approach autistic community members. And I think what's key is that, like, that experience and not being afraid to kind of seek that out. Like Autism NI have adults peer support groups for different ages, and like I think even just interacting with those would give people a really key insight into, one, how much of a spectrum it is, because you go to these and they're so diverse. Like, I'm sure it would really challenge people's kind of mindset on what autism is, and also just having a sit down and kind of also healing trauma that those autistic individuals might have from previous police interactions, and also just the fear around that. And the fear, I know for me, like, there's a high level of fear of being pulled over by police, and I've had walkthroughs and stuff with the Bangor police station where they've practiced pulling me over and stuff, and that really helped me, but it also helped those officers, because I was telling them things that they hadn't thought people would have questions about. I'm like, when do I disclose I have autism? And they're like, there's no time that you have to, like, you just say it. And I'm like, but what if I say it at the wrong time? And they're like, there's no wrong time. And I think just building the confidence in both and healing that relationship, and it's kind of going both ways.
Big shout out to Bangor there for doing a good bit of work around that, I think.
Bangor really.
I have to shout out to Holly McCartan, who works with the Autism Support Group, and she's done that work with Naomi and another person there. Really helpful work, again, all being driven by lived experience, being willing to learn, being willing to be led, and actually just putting ourselves in the shoes of other people. And I know that the work that we've done in partnership there with Naomi has been really helpful. It's influenced the recent, you'll have seen at the start of Autism Acceptance Month, we had stuff around sensory rooms and our sensory packs for victims and witnesses. So some people may look at that and think, what on earth? Toys and light up things and squishy things, like this is woke policing gone mad. But it isn't, because this was mentioned at the start, being able to move around, even having this as a tactical toolkit option, it shows the willingness, the understanding, and actually giving people the permission to do things like squeeze a ball in their hand. That makes all the difference. And anybody who's had any experience with autism, or in fact ADHD or other whole range of other neurodiversity conditions, will understand why those little tiny things make such a difference. But it also challenges people's perception of policing as being willing to reach out and being willing to make itself accessible to the whole range of needs in our community. And I suppose I'm really proud of the journey that's happened in partnership with the autistic community that we've really led on to try and support not only staff and officers in the organisation, but to support the organisation itself, to challenge itself, to not be afraid to move forward and to seek help in doing that.
Great. Anything else from your research we want to cover? Was that broadly it?
Well, your research talked quite a lot about training. And for me, it was really helpful, because I had been making the case that, yes, we do have good inputs. And I say this without trying to denigrate the really good work that we have in place. But, actually, our officers felt they needed more. They needed more support. They need more to help them practically in engaging and to feel more confident in doing that. And what you do for the autistic community will help for other communities that we link in with, including children and young people. So, some of the findings from that indicated that we have a journey to make, and your work did have national impact in policing world. So.
Yeah, I think like the research showed that there is pockets of policing that is doing amazing stuff, and that, you know, if an autistic individual was to interact with the police and where these pockets are happening, it would be amazing and so effective, and you would have best evidence and really good outcomes, and probably more faith from autistic individuals in reporting crimes and being taken seriously, and not kind of having the fear of how they come across, and the social interaction aspect of it being eased would really help with that. But I suppose it's those pockets, we just need to make them bigger and make it more consistent, because the stuff Bangor's doing is amazing, but then I have to hope I get pulled over in Bangor and I don't live in Bangor, so that's not likely.
Okay,
and that's where I come in, because my I see my role as sharing good practice, as keeping this on the agenda for people, raising awareness. And actually, whilst we have a lot of focus, really not as part of our core function, but because it's the right thing to do on how we're delivering services operationally, but also, I mean, our key focus is actually internally in the culture we have within the organisation, and it aligns very much to the policing plan outcome of being workforce focused. So having a representative workforce, so a workforce that is representative of autistic people and other people with other neurodivergent conditions, and one that values that and enables it. So we do have some work to do there, but any work that we do there has an added benefit to the autistic community. Yeah. So it all goes round and around.
And it's the same in a lot of different themes. You're right in what you're saying with children, hate crime, and the general sort of spectrum. You know, it is about recognising that different people have different needs, and taking the time to understand what those are and provide a service that is bespoke to that, or as bespoke as you can make it. That is fundamentally what we're talking about. But I wanted to give you, Finn, an opportunity to talk about, and we've sort of talked about the Autism Support Group and the Disability Support Network, but kind of wanted to understand more about what that was all about.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been involved with the Autism Support Group since around 2019, and I've been the chair for the last couple of years, and the journey that we've taken over that time has been phenomenal. Our size of our group has grown every single year. So within the Autism Support Group, which is inclusive towards wider neurodivergent conditions, I would say, we have over 250 members. And then across the wider disability support network, it takes us up to close to 500.
That's amazing.
So I suppose my key message in this today, and what I want to get across to people who are listening, is you are not alone. And that is important, because it can be a very lonely place when you feel that you're not understood and that the workplace isn't cut out for you. But I mean, our role is to keep raising that awareness. I mean, the work we did at the start of Autism Acceptance Month with Naomi and the sensory kits, even following that, in the last week we've had 6 new applications. So every time you see my face on internal communications, it's not necessarily because I like that, it's because I see that it reaches people, and that's what I'm trying to do. So if you're out there and you feel that you want to be part of that broader network, you're very welcome. I think there's safety and strength in numbers, and the work that we do is all about, and certainly in the next couple of years will be all about, really working with the organisation to develop our disability action plan. Since taking on the role of Disability Support Network Chair as well, I mean, I will be moving to merge those two groups together, because hidden disability and autism have that overlap. So there's going to be a lot of work on that, and in trying to make sure, for example, some key pieces around training, which you'll have seen we've been done a lot of work on, and Christine's talked about, but also trying to embed practices such as workplace adjustment plans as standard practice, to just ease things for people and to take that to a new level, and also the DDA processes, so that they are felt to be, that people feel valued within those, and that we are celebrating the impact that diverse range of people have. But so my call out is, please go on our point pages and do join the network. You'll be very welcome, and I get calls from different people every single day, and sometimes actually as a superintendent it can be very off-putting for people, but hopefully we get past that good and quick when it comes to this work.
You come across as very relatable in the podcast, I'm sure.
Well, look, I mean, this is all work that's about heart and soul.
Yeah.
This work comes from a place that's really personal to me, and I have had my own journey around it. I want to celebrate autism in this workplace. It is there, and it's a very good thing. And even the concept of that, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I mean, we're a night and day place in terms of acknowledging that. So, yeah.
Great.
Good things to come.
And I think that's really, really important, Finn, what you said there. But also, you know, there are other things as well going on in the background. And I think it's really important to just highlight, you know, I feel the PSNI have been reaching out and really, really trying to work with Autism NI as well on a range of different things. You know, I know we're working around some visual supports that might be helpful for individuals and for the officers as well, around the hate crime and stuff. Because I know, Paddy, the reporting figures for hate crime are extremely low. So I think, you know, having a visual about what that is, what a hate crime is, and how to report that might be something that, you know, is a step in the right direction to continue to support autistic individuals around that area.
And actually you make a very good point about officers being aware that, you know, disability hate crime is underreported, and if you come across somebody that's been targeted because of a disability, whether it be you know, visible or otherwise, you know, bear that in mind. You know, we can obviously make our own assessment, and we can recommend that things are motivated by hate. It doesn't have to be led by a victim or a witness.
Absolutely, and that's something that's been key that we've been focusing on over the past few months as well. And I think as well, I just want to remind people, to the officers that were hopefully listening, I think, you know, we do have our helpline. You know, that is available for professionals to call as well. You know, so they can call us if they have a question, or they're curious about something, you know, that they may want. You know, maybe they are supporting an individual and they, you know, have an awareness of their individual needs to a certain extent, and maybe just want a wee bit of guidance around how they could approach that individual with, you know, care and consideration to best support them. Pick up the phone and call our helpline, and we'll try our best to support you.
We'll maybe put the number in with the point article that goes out with this. But yeah, so I'm going to probably draw it to a close there, unless anybody else has anything else that they want to add. Naomi, you're busting to say something.
Yeah, I think just stay curious in calls and stuff, because I think it's very rare you'll get a call that says that a witness has autism, or, you know, a suspect has autism. And it's kind of like, whenever you go out on a call, just stay curious. Think like, could this person that's being pulled over have autism? What's the harm in asking? Is there anything I can do to support you? And just, bear it in mind, because we won't be offended. We will be very grateful that someone's asked, because I'm sitting there with my autism acceptance card. Like, please, somebody asked for me to show this.
Yeah, I think that's a very important message that we could probably take across all aspects of policing. But you're right, you know, it's really important that we're alive to the world around us and the diversity that's out there. So,
Absolutely.
Anything more from you, Finn?
No, I think Naomi said it better than I could. So,
Christine?
No, I think I'm good.
Look, thank you so much for participating in this discussion today. It's been extremely valuable. Hopefully those that are listening to this will get some value out of it as well. And thanks very much, and I'm sure we'll be in touch soon.
Great, thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thank you.
Thanks to everyone for listening.